Hey friends, welcome to this new bonus video. Now, today I'd like to address with you a solution for the problem of cascading slicers. So what are cascading slicers and what's the issue with them in Power BI? So let's explore that. You've seen I have the training dataset from the masterclass, and what I want to do is to create a simple visualization so we can see exactly what the problem is. So if I take from my orders table maybe my customer country, I tick it, and then because I don't want to have a map, I would like to have maybe a bar chart, because then it's much easier to see. And now of course I need some kind of measure, so I will go to my measures table and simply use my total sales in here. Tick this option, and then I can see here all my countries and the total sales. Let me put it here in the middle, and then also maybe add also the labels. Data labels. So we can see that the data will change depending on the slicers we apply. So, all right. So let's say we're gonna now go to our, where is it? The suppliers table. Let me just check. There it is, suppliers table. And here I'd like to use now my suppliers. So I go to supplier name, tick this option. By default, I get a list in here, but I switch it to a slicer. So like that. So now the report consumer has the option, he or she can now choose different kinds of supplier names in here, and based on the supplier, the data in the orders table will change. So I can click, for instance, for this one, tick this option, and you'll see that the data changes in here, right? So I untick this, I got my whole data set. Or if I hold my control key, I can also select several of them. That's also fine. By the way, if of course you would like to have some kind of drop-down list, you can also do this, go to the little down arrow here, and then choose a drop-down instead, if this is what you prefer for the slicers. And in the settings in Power BI, just want to mention this, there's also the option to add an apply button. Okay, but maybe let me go to the list, because then it's easier to see, and also maybe increase the size here a little bit. So I go to the items here in the formatting section and choose text size, and let's say put in 15 in here. Okay. So that's fine. So now we can choose suppliers and filter our data. And maybe make this a little bit smaller. Just, I don't want the visuals to overlap. Okay, like that. That's fine. The reason why this works is kind of simple, because let's take a look at our data model here. Tick this option, and you see that we get a star schema and a one-to-many relationship from the suppliers table to the orders table. That is why I can choose any of my columns from the suppliers table and use it as a filter in a slicer, for instance, to filter my data from the orders table, which in this case is the customer country we have here, and also the total sales, which are also derived from the sales column in here from the orders table, right? Okay, so that works, and always remember the filter direction by default is from the one side to the star or the many side. This is also highlighted here with the little arrow here. Now, next, let's say we also want to have a slicer from the dates table. Let's go back to our report and now choose, in this case, the dates table. Here it is. And choose, for instance, the date, like that. And I like to have this as a slicer, so I choose slicer instead of table. And then I now will simply use, it's up to you whether you want to have this hierarchy, but here I right click and say I'd like to see this as a date. So I have a slider. Like, just a second, there it is. And now I want to choose this as going here and say I'd like to have this maybe, where is it? Between. Okay, so now I have my slider in here. So it's a little bit small concerning the numbers, but hopefully you can still read it. Otherwise, just follow me along. Here, I would like to now choose a specific range, and let's say I'm choosing here in this case, let's go to the, I think it's around here, 30th of August in 2020. You see that the data changes here, of course, and here now I would go, also make this a little bit smaller, and let's say the report consumer, he or she chooses now a period, which is kind of, let's close, let's go in here and maybe do this differently, September, and let's say we're gonna use the 6th of September in 2020. Now see, of course we got a lot less data because our time frame is really narrowed down. And now I could choose one of my suppliers. Let's say I'm choosing here this first one, and then I can see data in here. Okay, not much, but at least the supplier provided here items which we have sold then to Sweden. Okay, next one, and you see the issue. So obviously now we have filtered the dates table to have only the data for a really specific window. On the other hand, we have another slicer which considers the suppliers, but some of them, actually, if we tick them, then there is no data in the view. So why is that? Well, the reason simply is there is no combination of sales between or within this narrow time frame and a supplier which provided, in this case this Bigfoot Breweries, provided any kind of supplies to us which we have sold. And this supplier table, which you probably also have noticed, let me just remove this for now, is not filtered. So we chose to use filter the dates table here, but the suppliers table here as a slicer is not filtered. It still shows all the values. And that's what I meant with the cascading slicer problem or filter problem. Why is that happening? Well, to explore this, it's quite easy to go to the model view one more time and take a look at your model. So in our case, this is the example model we use, but of course, if you apply this to your own data, then it will behave exactly the same. The problem we face is in our star schema, the dimension tables, which are the tables on top on the one side, those filter the facts table, which is the orders table, this one, but they do not filter each other, which means that if I select something from the dates table here, this will filter the orders table, but it will not filter the suppliers table. And the same is true for the employees table, for instance, or the other way around. Suppliers table can filter the orders table, but it cannot filter, by default at least, the dates table. Because the relationship is from the one side to the many side, and not from many side here, from the orders table, then back to the one side of the dates table. Now, of course, some would argue, okay, we can make this relationship bidirectional, so that the filter direction is from the many side to the one side as well. However, this is something you want to avoid as much as possible. If you have really a use case to enable bidirectional relationship, then do this. But if you don't, then try to avoid it as much as possible. Because if you enable bidirectional relationships and you have a really complex model, then Power BI will or might give you wrong results, depending on how you filter and slice and dice the data. So you need to be really, really careful when applying bidirectional relationships. And this is why I want to show you a better solution for that. So we know that the suppliers table can only filter the orders table, and the same is true for the dates table, for instance. Dates table can also only filter the orders table, but not the suppliers table, and the other way around. But we can use actually a measure, our own measure, in order to make this actually happening, the filter between the dimension tables. So how do we do this? Let's go back to our report view in here. And now let's actually create a measure which simply checks whether there is data in an orders table for the specific supplier regarding the current filter in the report view we have. How we do this? Well, we right-click on the measures table here and create a new measure. You can also do it here from the ribbon section if you want. But here I like to do it directly in here because then I have the measure inside my measures table. Let's take this and let's have a look. Just a second. And there's the measure. And now here, let's say I will filter measure. Okay. You can name this whatever you like. But here I name it filter measure. And the formula itself is quite short because all I want to do for now is simply check, is there data in the orders table for this specific, in this case, supplier, regarding the current filter selection we have regarding the dates. So to do this, we simply check is empty. There's an is empty function, is empty, there it is. And this simply checks, let me just, here, returns true if the specified table or table expression is empty. That's all. So we just need to give it a table. Now the table we want to check is, of course, the orders table. So we simply type in orders table here, orders TBL, and close parenthesis. And that's all. Now let's actually execute this. So this will give us a true or false. Okay, there's our measure. And let's quickly check that. Let's actually go in here. Remember, when I chose big food breweries, for instance, if I tick this option, I don't have any data. So let's go in here and say we'd like to actually switch this just for a minute to a table. So now we can see the supplier names. It's a little bit small, but believe me, the second entry here is big food breweries. So for now, I just avoided to make the size bigger. Just believe me, you can see that hopefully. Now let's actually check this is empty, what we've created. So the filter measure here, check this box and add it to the visual. And now you see we got trues and falses. And true, for instance, for big food breweries, as well as for the next one, as well as for this escargot nouveau, and so on. And all of them who return true are actually the ones who do not have any data in the sales table for this specific period we currently have selected. So if I click, for instance, this one, which also returns true here, let me click it, you see that there's also no data. So everything here is currently grayed out, but this just means there is no data. On the other hand, if I choose, for instance, this one, the first one, which specifies false, let me tick this option. Here you see you have data. So it's highlighted, right? Currently it's not completely filtered, it's just highlighted, but you can change the interaction if you want. If you go to the Format tab here, Edit Interactions, and just go to Filtering here, then you see here the filtered data. So false means there is data, and if I go to one of the true ones, for instance, exotic liquids, then there is no data. Okay, so this helps us, this measure, to specify whether we actually want to show the supplier name or not. So let me just remove the filter measure for now from the table, because I want to revert it back to a slicer. Go to the slicer option here, and we got our slicer again. And the idea now is to use the measure we have created and simply filter the slicer. So you have the filter pane here. If you can't see it, just remember you just need to click here to expand it. And then you need to select the visual, in this case the slicer. And here you have the supplier name. And then you can add additional filters in here. Because for the supplier name, it's kind of simple because you only can do either select the specific supplier, or you can also use here, for instance, top N, basic, advanced filtering, and so on. But what I want to show you is now the following. As I said, drag the filter measure into the filter visual here. And if you do that, and now try to expand it, you'll see that this is not working currently. So the reason for this is it currently returns a Boolean value, which is true or false. And what we need is actually a number. So the measure should return a number like 1 and 0 in order to filter here. But this can be easily done if we convert the true and false into 1s and 0s. To do this, let's just remove the measure for now and just go to the measure one more time. So here we go. And now just wrap all this, or the complete measure, into the integer function. So the integer function returns the true or false from the measure into 1s and 0s. So 0 means it's a false, and 1 means it's true. Now let me close the parenthesis here, and we should be good to go. Let's execute this. Okay, so that's our modified measure. And now if I drag this measure, select first the slicer in here, and now drag the filter measure one more time into the filter pane. And now say here, you can see that now we have the option to is less, is greater, and so on, because now we have a number. And if we now say is, so is exactly, and here you can type in a 0. 0 means it's false. Now if I click on apply, watch what happens with the supplier name. So remember, big food breweries, for instance, didn't return any data. Also the next two didn't return any data for the specific time frame we have filtered. Now let me click apply. And now you see those are gone from the filter. And all the supplier names which remain here, if I take the first one here, I can see data. If I take the second one, see data. Third one, data. Fourth one, data, and so on. So now you can only select, or the report consumer can only select here suppliers which actually show data in here. And the same is true the other way around. Of course, if you, instead of using 0 here, go to the 1 and click apply, now you see the Bigfoot breweries and so on, and all those suppliers actually will return nothing down there. So you see, if I take this one, nothing, 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 and so on. And that's basically how you can create this cascading slicers, it's called. So that means that one slicer can filter another slicer even though you do not have bidirectional relationship enabled in the model. So let me switch this back to, first let me untick this here, and let me switch this back to 0, click apply, and that's it, what we want to have. Now of course I can just remove this from the view, and now the report end consumer will get exactly what he or she wants. So he or she will, based on the dates table date which is here filtered, I will get only the suppliers visible which are actually providing data and information, and this is how I can avoid for the other visuals in the view which are dependent on my orders table that they are empty or don't show any data. Okay? And this, as I said, is the much better option instead of using bidirectional filters. So for bidirectional relationships, there are use cases for that, but they are really specific. So if you can avoid them, then do it. Okay? And now you have learned a way which you can use in order to avoid the empty visuals after filtering, for instance, various slicers. Okay? And of course, finally, let me just say this can of course also be done the other way around. Because currently we have only created this for the supplier name, but of course you can apply the same filter logic to all the other measures from the other dimension tables. Okay? So that's it for this video. So hopefully that was helpful, and as always, thanks a lot for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Until then, best guys.